Welcome to You Can Win in Court. Sometimes it's not enough to be innocent. The legal system is complex, and occasionally the innocent are wrongly accused. Here we will discuss in layman's terms the nuances from real court cases to provide insights on how you can best prepare to get a fair chance in court. And now, please welcome your host, Dr. Petra Deeter.
Welcome, and today we have Vahan Yepremyan from Yepremyan Law Firm, Inc. in Los Angeles. And today we're going to be talking about business setup. I'm so excited to have Vahan with us today. He, with more than 2 decades of experience and so many prestigious awards, and I just can't wait to talk about this topic because I think a lot of the time we overlook the importance of preventing litigation. So business setup is something that should be done beforehand and to be done correctly. So thank you so much, Vahan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. So your law firm is specifically you're specialized in business and corporate transactional law, right?
That's one of the divisions of our law firm. We have a few different areas of specialty or expertise, and representing businesses and entrepreneurs is one of them, a main one that I spend a lot of my time on. And we essentially help people from pre-launch, when they just have an idea and they don't know what to do with it and how to get started. And then, all the way up to pre-IPO. Basically before they go public, we could, help them scale them, and these deals could involve licensing and franchising and, joint ventures and, all kinds of different structures and business strategies. And part of it also is, because I have a business background and business education as well, it helps me understand the business model behind their vision and how they're going to be executing, so that legally we can structure in a way that it will support the growth and the vision that they have for the business.
Right. That's something I noticed about you too, is that you are also a serial entrepreneur. So you actually in the trenches and you're doing the business, and it's not just like running the law firm, but all types of businesses I noticed. So
yes, I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship, and I love working with entrepreneurs, and whether as an attorney, we also provide business management services for companies, and so we represent a lot of like influencers and celebrities, and we provide a business management. So basically, handle all their business side of it, from working with their CPAs and investment advisors and payroll and licenses and permits and structuring deals and negotiating deals on them. So I really enjoy entrepreneurship myself as well. I've started more than a dozen companies. I currently have several companies where I'm a co-founder and a partner in, and I think that gives me and our firm an advantage, a competitive advantage, because one, I speak the language of the entrepreneurship. I've been through and going through the experience, and I know what they're about to embark on, and the cost they're about to pay, and in sweat and blood and tears, and I understand the challenges, and I understand the obstacles, and so it helps me as an attorney help them navigate that when I know what that journey is going to be like. Right. And so, I'm very much in the trenches with them with our own companies. We have a film company. It's called Catch Up Entertainment. It's a film production and a distribution company. We have a real estate development company with a few other partners. And so, and I've at different times I've had different ventures as well. My law firm is my main one that I've had for the last 23 years, and one that I spend most of my time in. But I really enjoy the entrepreneurial experience as well. So I play in that area a lot.
That is awesome. So let's talk about, we're going to be talking about setting up a business, but let's say before they set up a business, somebody have an idea, or maybe they even start running some kind of business. At what point and why should they even set up a business? Why can't they just go out there and just, let's say, I sell something and I get money and not worry about setting up something? At what point should they be considering setting up a business?
That's a good question. And there's many options they have of how to set it up, and several different reasons why they should have a more formal setup. So you could have a sole proprietor setup, which is basically you and your business are the same. You are not protected, your personal assets are not protected, and even if you have a separate business account set up, and even if you have a DBA, which is the doing business as, or a fictitious business name filed. So, technically you have a business name, a separate business account. You could even get a tax ID number with that, fictitious business name. But if you don't have a formal entity like an LLC or a corporation set up, you and your business are considered one in the same. And business's liabilities are your liabilities, and vice versa. If you have a personal credit card debt, or vice versa, so it's all in the same. And so any judgment on the business, any legal action against the business, the creditors can easily come after your personal assets, your personal bank accounts, and all that stuff.
Right. So we just talk about sole proprietary. So I could definitely see the negative of it, which is even though you might set up all these things like the DBA, like fictitious name, you might have a tax ID, you might have a separate bank account, but you have the personal liability. So let's say if you have a lawsuit or something and if you lose, then let's say you have a home, they can go after your house. You could lose your house, right? Even though this is a business and your home is your personal home.
Yes.
So that's the risk of it. Is there a situation where it's a good thing to just go as a sole proprietary, and is there any benefit?
Well, some of the benefits, I guess, or the advantages are it's less costly. For example, both to set up initially and to maintain. LLCs and corporations have minimum franchise, for example, in California, franchise tax board fee, which is the state tax of $800 a year. There's the initial cost to set it up, and then, taxes, separate corporate taxes, and LLC taxes, unless it's a sole member LLC, single member LLC. And so it's less paperwork, it's less costly. Initially, a lot of people, when they first start, and depending on also an area of business or industry they're in, if it's low liability and if they're not dealing with a lot of consumers and everything else, some people start with a DBA or a fictitious business name just to see how things go. And this is at least the minimum you should have, because there's some people that also start a business and they have their personal and business account commingled in one. They don't have a formal fictitious name or a business name, and so they just kind of come up with a name, but it's not formalized. And it's a minimum effort that I think should be put into keep it separate for accounting purposes, for bookkeeping, tax purposes. Just you don't want to, even though you're still one person, you want to keep those separate. At some point, whether you're trying to apply for a business loan, you want to partner up with somebody, and everything else, you may have to present all these numbers and all these statements and everything else. So you don't want to show your personal and business all mixed up. So the advantage is the cost and the how easy it is to set it up. And it's not very complex and doesn't require much paperwork. And once you in LA County, a DBA or fictitious business name filing is good for 5 years. So once you set it up, then you don't have to do anything for another 5 years. Now that doesn't protect your business name, You know, that's a trademark filing that you would have to do, but you'll have a name, a business name that you could open a business account with, and you know, accept checks or payment under that business name. And so you'll at least have an appearance of a business, you know, and you can have business cards and everything else. And so a lot of startups initially do that. In my first year of my firm, 23 years ago, I started as a DBA. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone as a law firm to start that. You know, everything was self-funded, and I basically had zero capital when I first started, and so and zero clients when I first started. So it was just, okay, you know, it's this small office, and you know, I'm sitting there, you know, it was me and a paralegal, and all right, where do we go, and how do we get clients, and how do we, you know, and this is before internet and internet research and everything else, and so everything was a lot more complicated or difficult. But once the business takes off, and some businesses I wouldn't even recommend doing that is even in the early stages. You know, for example, if you're doing anything that exposes you of liability, let's say, you know, you have some kind of, I don't know, food production where people, you know, or you know, vitamins, or you know, transportation, or anything that could result in a sizable lawsuit and a judgment against you, you wanna have that extra protection, and that's where the LLCs and corporations come in. And you know, when you're deciding initially, there's a few decisions you have to make. One is, where do I incorporate or set up the LLC? Jurisdiction. Should it be in California, for example? If you know, in California, should it be in, you know, some people, Delaware, for example, you know, that was kind of the old school, that was the place, and still for many initial entrepreneurs, still the place to go. You know, Nevada has become popular as well because of kind of easiness of filing and lower costs and no state tax there. Florida as well. And so figuring out technically and legally speaking, you should be either incorporated in the state where your business is operating out of, where your principal business offices are, and your operations and activities are. And if you even set up somewhere else, let's say you're set up, you know, in Nevada, your company, and you know, you got some kind of headquarters there, but then you're actually doing business in California, you would have to take that Nevada corporation, which for purposes of California is a foreign entity, even though it's a, you know, it's just another state, it's considered foreign for California. So you have to take that Nevada corporation and register it in California as a foreign entity doing business in California. In which case then, you know, you start being exposed to state taxes and all the filings and everything else as well. So, you know, this decision as far as, you know, where to do this, you know, a lot of people mainly do it to save in taxes or the annual state tax fees. You should consider some other things and discuss it with your CPA and an attorney as well. You know, one of the reasons Delaware was and still to some extent popular is that because there was a lot of initial companies that were started there many years ago. And as they litigated cases and as the case law developed. So going in, you kind of can predict certain outcomes of disputes and everything else. And so there's some case law that helps you. And, you know, some states are more friendly to business owners and you know, provide certain protections and certain, like for example, in Nevada, it's easier to, it's less of your information is disclosed than, for example, in California. Yeah. And so there's some considerations to be had as far as where, and then the other decision is what type of an entity do I set it up? You know, and then two most popular ones are either an LLC or a corporation. And the corporation could be an S-corp or a C-corp. And again, I'm mainly talking about California, but different states have certain different variations because business law and corporate law varies from state to state, and each state has its own set of rules and regulations. But a majority of it is very similar to each other. LLCs and S corporations are what they're called pass-through entities. And for tax purposes, there's no double taxation. And so whatever, after deducting all the expenses, whatever profits are left are passed through to the owners, and they pay taxes, personal income taxes on those. C corporation has the double taxation of taxed at a corporate level and then on a personal level. And all corporations, when you first open by default, are C corporations. And you have to qualify and submit a specific form to qualify as an S corporation. And there's certain requirements of how many owners there are, and if those owners are residents and have Social Security and they're tax residents of California. If it's a foreign national, then you can't have an S-corp, or if it's an entity. And so then you have that, and then maybe an LLC might be a better option, And so again, that's something that some of these decisions you have to coordinate, or your attorney will have to coordinate between your business plans and operations and with your CPA and the tax consequences. And then obviously he'll know the legal, or she will know the legal issues for those decisions. And so it's not just the one-sided thing. Hey, there's no state tax, so I'm just going to go file there. Or, hey, I'm just operating here, so that's it. And, I have, everyone says LLC, so I'm just going to go set up an LLC. Even LLC and S corporations, they're both passed through, but they have some differences as well on what options you have and what rights and flexibility you have in both entities. And so, those are.
Yeah, let's dig a little bit more into that. And I mean, just to sum up what you have talked about so far, well, we talk about, at first we talk about sole proprietary, and at some point it is recommended that they should, even at the beginning, sometimes they should be consider filing something to separate their personal liability. And then you talk about even if they stay at sole proprietary, they should still separate their finances, because commingling fund could create a lot of problems later regarding tax or even future partnership or that type of things, right? And then when we talk about forming some kind of entity, the first question you brought up is about deciding where. So I noticed that you mentioned about, maybe ease to set up and low tax and maybe case law. So it depends on that kind of question, or where you operate. So you can choose which states that you would go to. So like you mentioned, like even if you form in Delaware, for example, or Nevada or Wyoming or whatever, but if you operate in California, you still have to register in California and you still have to pay taxes. So if you're really operating in California, isn't it just make a lot more sense to just go to California and file your LLC or whatever in California instead of doing twice the work?
In most cases, yes, that's the logic, and that's what I usually recommend in most cases. Now, again, as we're talking in very general terms, and each business and each venture has unique circumstances and facts and plans. Some, for example, venture capital companies only deal with Delaware corporations for some reason.
I see.
And so you have to look into the kind of the whole picture and right. Weigh in. Okay, this is the plus, this is the minus, and and some entrepreneurs say that's fine. I'm going to do Delaware, and I will organize register it in California, but I do want a Delaware corporation, and that's what it is. And they have certain reasons, and maybe good reasons for that. And right. Then but for you just to go off and say, hey, I've heard Delaware is where everyone is, and so I need to do that, and you just kind of just do it without putting any thought to it, that's not the right way. And so, the point is that these are decisions that need to be made with your tax advisor, your legal advisor, and keeping in mind your operation, where your capital is coming from, and how it's going to be, how is your company going to grow and where to. And so if you live in California, if your business is in California, if your employees are going to be in California, and you have no contact with any other state, it's going to be hard to convince California state that you don't owe any taxes to them, business taxes, and, because they're going to say, well, when was the last time you were in Delaware? Have you ever been to Delaware? Any of your employees been to Delaware? And a lot of times these companies have just a PO box address in these states, and so you have to be careful in doing that, just to avoid that $800 or to avoid the state tax.
Right.
So consulting the tax and legal advisors before setting it up is very important.
Yeah. So the first question is about where, and then the next question you talk about is what kind of structure. So the typical structure you mentioned is like LLC or C-corp or S-corp. And so the default is a C-corp, and then if you want an S-corp, you actually have to get qualified for that. But the S-corp and the LLC, I guess the benefit is that is a pass-through type of entity, so the tax is simpler, right? Because it's going through your personal tax. What are other benefit or consideration why someone should go to LLC instead of C-corp?
Well, so C-corp, these are more, so I want to also clarify one thing. So these classifications of C-corp or an S-corp or an LLC, most of that has more of a tax consequence, like especially C or S is more of a tax consequence and a classification. And legally, whether you're a C-corp or an S-corp, that protection that you're seeking to have that separate legal entity is there in place. Both an LLC and a corporation, whether it's a C or an S corporation, they are separate legal entities from you, the individual, as the owner. And so if there is a judgment on your LLC or corporation, there's a lawsuit or if there's a claim, whether it's a customer or an employee or a partner or another company that you're dealing with, and let's say they end up getting a judgment, unless you've done something wrong personally, unless you've give reason to what's called piercing the corporate veil, you committed fraud, intentional misrepresentation,
or commingled funds or something like that. Personal fund with the business fund. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
If it's just been bad business decisions or bad business, whatever it is, climate or whatever, and nothing intentional and nothing dishonest, then whatever judgments or claims the other party ends up winning against you, it will go against the company, not you. Now, if the company has assets, they can go after the assets. And so that also should play in your strategy as you're structuring your businesses, whether all of your assets are in one corporation or in one entity, or you divvy them up. So for example, I have many clients who own the buildings within which they operate, whether it's a restaurant or it's a manufacturing plant, whether it's a store, whether it's whatever. And so what we recommend is that the property that has a separate value in itself is held in a separate, for example, an LLC. And then your operating business, where you deal with customers and employees and products, and you're exposed to liability, potential liability, is separate. And your, for example, S corporation, which is your business, is leasing the property from your LLC. Even though you could be the 100% owner of both, doesn't matter. These are two separate legal entities, and one is leasing from the other. And so the judgments against the business will not touch your entity where your property, so they will not touch the property. And similarly, for example, there's some kind of an issue with the property, and let's say you can't pay the mortgage and whatever, there's some judgments on that, they cannot touch your business because that's separate. And so, you know, even as you're structuring these things and trying to, you know, not only protect yourself from the business, but within the business, you have to think, how do I protect, you know, I have clients who have certain intellectual properties, whether it's their brand, whether there's certain designs or formulas or whatever they are, right? Whether they have a, you know, a product line, you know, alcohol line or foods or protein shakes or whatever. A lot of times what we do is, you know, if the brand has enough of its own value, it's worth keeping it separate from, again, the operating business. So that, again, if there's any judgments or anything else, that's just your operating business, you know, and that business can go bankrupt, but your brand and your intellectual property, which you've developed and put in a lot, you know, and that's where the value is kept separate. And you just do a licensing deal or licensing agreement between the two entities where your company that's holding your IP gives the rights to the other entity to use the IP. And it could be for a nominal fee, or it could be for, you know, specific negotiated. And especially in cases where, for example, you own an IP, 100% it's your IP, but your business has partners. And so then you could agree to some kind of a licensing fee because your partner, for example, has no right or interest in your IP. And so that business is licensing those rights, you know, or you licensing it to a third party. And so there's other considerations going in, and not just your personal protection, but protection of the assets, protection of the business and everything else, you know. And as companies grow, and I've had clients that have started with, you know, one corporation, and then as they grow and their business grows, another one pops up, another one, you know. And so, like, you know, I have a company that does a certain type of distribution of certain type of products, and they own the property separately, and they have their business, you know, the warehousing and all that other stuff. They have a separate transportation company that transports and picks up and delivers and everything else, because that's a whole different operation. It's got its own set of liabilities. And so, and, you know, slowly, you know, as they've grown, we've kind of separated. And then later on, they've had situations where a different set of partners or investors would come in for specific, you know, for example, for their transportation company. And they're not doing transportation for anyone else but their own products, but it's still a transportation company. And they brought in a partner, and partner came in that had some kind of technology and some kind of know-how and everything else to develop into a whole different thing, where now not only are they delivering their own products, but that's turning into something where now they provide services for other companies to do this. And so, you know, you have to also look at which direction is this going and where is it going to go in. And as it does, and, you know, are there separate ownership percentages or owners in different ventures? Then it's easier to keep it separate, you know. And one kind of, just to go back when we're talking about sole proprietor versus corporation or LLC, one of the other advantages of having an LLC or corporation is, for example, a partner or an investor wants to come in and they want a percentage of your business. But the business is you, instead of a corporation where you can assign them 10% shares of the company, or give a lender or an investor collateral of your corporate shares, or 50% shares, for example, or whatever. It's so much easier to do that deal when it's that formal entity with shares and membership interest if it's an LLC, versus it's just you and your personal account and even business/personal account. And what do you do and how do you do? And besides your personal liability, because once, you know, they're giving it to you and your business, is the same thing, right? And so if you can't pay them back, you're personally, you know. Now, they also have to be conscious of the fact that even if you have an LLC, even if you have a corporation, it will protect you to the extent that you respect that formality. So if you're going in and signing certain documents and taking loans or signing stuff as an individual, and sometimes you actually may have to when it's a new business, and let's say you want to get a lease for your office, or you want to get a new vehicle for the business, and business does not have enough credit history. The companies or the landlords will ask you to co-sign as an individual. And in that case, if the business doesn't pay the rent or the lease, you are personally responsible and liable. So you have to be mindful what you're signing. And even if it's for business purpose, if you co-sign individually, you individually are responsible. So keep in mind and be mindful of the documents you're signing. And even if you have to sign it, know what your exposure is going to be. That, if the company can pay, can I pay? What's my, plan B? And as soon as you can, and in some instances, for example, I've had a few clients where, their initial lease ends and they have to renew it. And we'll go in and we'll negotiate and say, hey, they've paid for 3 years or 2 years or 5 years without any late payments, without issues. I think there's enough history here. We don't want our client personally to be attached to the lease. They get out of the business, as and so, or same with the cars and what equipment and everything else. And then at that point you have, you can show tax returns and, profit and loss statements and balance sheets and cash flow statements that hopefully will, because you want to limit your personal liability. So whenever you don't have to, or you can avoid it, don't sign it.
Right. So I mean, my background, I used to raise fund for tech from VC, like venture capitalists and angel investors. And obviously, they did not fund into LLC. You have to be a C-corp. And they don't fund into S-corp either.
Okay.
It has to be a C-corp. But I mean, is there, and you mentioned about, LLC, you could potentially have membership interest. So it seemed like it's possible maybe angel investor might put money into an LLC structure.
I've had many instances, in this past 23 years, and I've probably represented probably roughly close to 3,000 ventures and entrepreneurs and businesses. A lot. There hasn't been, there's been a lot, because about 30% of my clients are international or foreign. Europe, Eastern Europe, Latin America, China, Middle East. And so a lot of them don't have that VC strategy. It has to be in a C-corp. And especially if they're going to be taking any ownership in the company, they want the structure that's going to minimize tax liability. And so we've had no issues with investors coming into LLCs. But like you said, there's instances where institutional lenders will ask for certain structures and certain formations. You can always, because there are businesses where, like I have clients who start a certain way, and then they're thinking, okay, in 5 years I want to do an IPO, or in 10 years or whatever. And so initially they might start with an S-corp or an LLC, and as they start getting closer to, that goal, then you convert, and maybe you could, move the corporation to Delaware or turn the LLC to corp. There's ways to change the classifications and the states of formation and everything else. And so, again, and this is why I was saying earlier is, in deciding what type of entity and where to form, there's many considerations. It's tax and your operations and where your capital is coming from and what their requirements are, and all that stuff should be considered. And you're not going to have all the answers in the beginning. And so, that also could drive you crazy. Like, okay, I need to know, you're not going to know it. At some point, you're going to have to start. And so just know, do the best you can with the information you have and with the professional advice of people around you and that you hire. And then, as things change, keep communicating with them so that they can, if necessary, make certain adjustments or plan to do that in a coming future. But yeah, if you already know that you're going to want, certain VC funding, right away, then okay, start looking at what are the requirements, because you don't want to start a California LLC if they're going to require a Delaware C-corp, and you're going to be approaching them as soon as you open. You're going to go up and pitch, your project or venture to them. And so you want to consider all those things. But I've had, outside of the VC firms, a lot of individual investors, and me, I have a company with partners that we also invest in a few different things. We've invested in LLCs and S-corps and C-corps. So again, each situation is unique, and each has its set of facts and circumstances. So this is where you kind of just need to dive in and say, okay, in this situation, what is the best thing, and where is this going, and how is that going to change the needs and demands of the company? How are they going to change? And
so you mentioned that they should be making this decision with their CPA and their lawyer. At what point is a point that they should absolutely, definitely get a lawyer involved? Because at the beginning, obviously they didn't have a lawyer. So at some point, and what is that point where they must have a lawyer?
Look, being an entrepreneur myself, and being an entrepreneur who initially started with zero capital and zero investors, I am very aware of and sympathetic of the entrepreneurial journey initially when they start, and capital is an issue, and cash flow is an issue, and in fact,
and the DIY attitude of entrepreneur,
yes,
right?
Yes, yeah.
We like to do things ourselves. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And so a lot of them will postpone for good reasons or bad reasons. Spending money on CPA advice or accountant advice or tax advice and attorney advice as long as possible, because they feel like that money that is not going into their company is not contributing to the company's well-being or the growth. And sometimes that might be the case, depending on the situation. But a lot of times, look, you're building a house, and unless you have the right foundation on which you're building, the whole thing can crumble. So investing in figuring out how large of or how deep that foundation needs to be, how large of it needs to be, and the measurements and everything else, right, as you're building a house, it might think like, okay, I just want to build a house. I just want to have like pretty windows and nice doors, and I know what color it's going to be, and here's a picture, it's going to have a pretty backyard and pool and stuff. And and entrepreneurs, we by nature, we're drawn to shiny things, right? And we have this big visions, and this is what it's going to look like and everything else. And a lot of them forget the fundamentals, the boring stuff, the measurements, and there's certain requirements, engineering things, and posts, and so this is similar. And when you're building a business, you need to know what is the foundation on which I'm building, which is the structure, the legal structure, this tax structure. And because what happens is, if you don't do that properly, and then tax time comes, that $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 you were going to spend on tax advice initially structuring it might cost you $10,000 or $20,000 down the line. Might cost you an investor coming in or a VC coming in and investing in it. And so, we are resourceful as entrepreneurs, and we do try to do everything by ourselves. But I think I've never seen a successful entrepreneur, when I mean, let's define success here, because you could define success in many different ways, right? Just being happy with what you're doing. If you don't make any money, it could be a successful entrepreneur, it doesn't matter. But financially successful entrepreneur that is experiencing growth in his business, continual growth, and is able to scale his business, is not one that tries to do everything by himself or herself. Ability to delegate, an ability to consult and advise and do due diligence and gather information and analyze and process and make decisions based informed decisions is a key quality of these successful entrepreneurs. And so similarly, if you try, you have a company to run, a team to build, finances to raise, execute your ideas, worry about growth and disruptions that are coming. The same time trying to figure out what the taxes are in the state and county and the federal, and then figure out the legal things and the contracts and what licenses and permits I need. It's a lot. It's a lot. Okay. And so unless you have a team and or background in that, you have the time where you're not in a hurry. It's like, what, I'm first going to do all this research. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to execute. You exchanging your time for money. And so if it takes you 2 more months to launch your project, and how much behind does it set in revenue generation, and how much was it going to cost to just have a 30-minute call with the CPA or a meeting with the CPA? And a lot of attorneys and CPAs offer an initial free consultation. And so take advantage of that. In conversations, you also learn about 20 to 30% of people who come to me for a consultation of, hey, I need XYZ. And a lot of attorneys will take that and say, okay, X costs this much, Y costs this much, Z costs this much, pay me, here it is. And they just give it to them. What I do is, and it's a little bit more of my time invested in it, in the consultation, but I ask them, why do you need that? And what do you think that's going to accomplish? And what is your vision? And where is this going? And tell me the big picture. And about 25% of the time, they actually need something either slightly or completely different from what they're asking. They just kind of got this thing where, okay, this is what I'm thinking about, and this person has a similar business and this is what they're doing. And then they come in, but they have a different vision or different direction they're going. And so really understanding and speaking to somebody who could kind of guide you could change, you might end up with a completely different set of contracts and arrangements. And so, I recommend at least take advantage of the free consultation, at least that. But can I sit down and figure out my taxes? Probably, but that's not my specialty. I don't, I don't do intellectual property. I have an associate attorney who, helps with our clients, trademark filings, patent, copyright, and all that stuff. Can I sit and figure it out? Yeah. It'll take me a little longer to do it, and probably much longer for an entrepreneur who doesn't have the legal background. But that's not my specialty. I do contracts, I set up companies, I advise on other things. And so figure out what your strengths are and where your return on invested time is the highest, and focus on that, and then delegate everything else, because otherwise you're not going to grow unless you're delegating and you're trusting, whether it's your team or, outside third party. I have, most of my clients have been with me for, I think averages 5 or 6 plus years. And, I speak about their business as if it's my business, and, it's our problem to solve and everything else. And that says a lot about them as much as me, because they've kind of brought me in, they've kind of included me in their business, where I felt comfortable in having these discussions and saying, hey, I think this is going to be a problem down the line, the way you're growing or the direction you're going. We need to address this now before it becomes an issue. And so, and them listening and figuring out. And so, whether, because sometimes I act as an in-house counsel and sometimes I'm, outside counsel as well. And so depending on the situation, you want to surround yourself with the right advice, because you're not going to be able to do everything at the same time and do it well and do it fast.
So that's a great advice, right? I mean, it's not just about a legal advice as such, but I mean, it's a really good wisdom to look at, you know, value for your time, and also self-diagnosis could be wrong sometime, right?
Right.
And having somebody that have the knowledge and expertise as a part of your team, and especially somebody like you that look at your client as if it's your own business and worry about, you know, potential problem and watch out for them, that's really important. So what about when people go out there and look for lawyers, what are, I mean, ideally they find someone like you described, but what are some red flags that they should watch out for when they try to pick out a good lawyers?
One, just you know, sometimes people do more research about the restaurants they're gonna go, you know, for dinner than the professional services they're gonna hire. You know, Google them just to see the reviews, and not just necessarily the reviews, the background, you know, the experience, what they have done, and then so that will tell you certain things. You can, for example, for attorneys, you can go on California State Bar, which is the organization that licenses the attorneys, and any complaints, any not complaints, but suspensions, revocations, any disciplinary action against the attorney will be in there. See if they've had issues, if they've had, you know, client commingled funds and you know, all this stuff. That's a red flag right there, you know. And so do a little bit of research first. Second, go meet them, and hopefully, for example, I offer a free initial consultation, because not only are they interviewing me, I'm interviewing them. I don't take every client, and I want to make sure that I'm going to provide value to the client. And sometimes I see, you know, with their plans, with their approach, and with their, you know, after, you know, it's like, I don't think it's going to be a good fit. And so just go in and talk, especially if there's a free consultation. Just go meet them before you actually hire them. And then, and then before you give them money, talk about the terms. Talk about what it's going to cost, whether it's hourly, whether it's flat fee, or whether it's project by project. Know the costs, but not only the costs, but also time frame. How long is it going to take? And, you know, is there any kind of follow-up work? Are costs included in that or not? Is the attorney going to work on it, or is a paralegal going to work on it, or is an assistant going to work on it? You know, how approachable and how connected are they? How quickly can you expect a response from them? You know, one of the biggest complaints from clients I get that they come to me from another attorney is I can never get hold of them. It takes them a week, or it takes them 5 days, or it takes them whatever. Yeah, and when you're an entrepreneur, you want things done yesterday, and you're impatient, and you should be, you know, you're putting in your money, your time, and if you're paying for somebody to do certain things, you should have certain expectations and standards. And so, you know, ask these questions. You know, you can ask for references. You can ask for, you know, have they worked in that area or industry? You know, have they how long have they, you know, it could be a 10-year old law practice, or an attorney of 10 years, but he's only started doing business law in the last 6 months, because before that he was doing immigration law, criminal law. So also in that specific area, how long has he been doing it? You know, or is he just doing that on the side? You know, and so you know, you want to interview them, and you want to, because you're hiring them just like you get an employee. You know, have that approach. You know, and also see if you could work with that person. Is there a, you know, kind of personally, is that someone you want to, you know, you want to work with? And then, you know, how did the payments and work? You know, how much do you pay in advance? How much do you do after? How much, you know, what does the billing look like? Just have the whole picture, you know, before you hire. And then as well, what you could do is you could ask for example, if you need, I don't know, 5 things, and you don't need them all at once. Maybe, you know, you could say, okay, you know, I want all these 5 things, but let's start with the first thing. and then let them do the first thing, see how that works out, and then go to the next one, or have an option of walking away halfway through. I mean, you always have an option of working through, but does your money come with you or stay? And so just be conscious of all that stuff, but yeah, do some research ahead of time, and the experience and just anything else that might be a red flag for you.
So talking about research, I mean, I noticed that your firm has an excellent record. I mean, on the state bar, you entered the state bar in 1997 with completely clean record, and your third year in a row in the top 5,000 of English, and your top attorney, I think, in America in recent year, right? Like, what are some of the things we should know about your firm? Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. The credit goes to my team. My growth. I'm one of those entrepreneurs that delegate, and although I work on clients' files and everything else, but without a team you can't really grow and scale. And so all this growth has come because I have an amazing team, and also I have amazing clients. Interesting enough, most of my growth, and we have in the last 3 years in a row, Inc. 5000 does this kind of fastest growing private companies in America, and they look at your last 3 years of tax returns and verify with your CPA and all that stuff, and they look at number of employees and the revenue and all that stuff. So for a company that's been around for 20 years, it's unusual to be in that hyper growth. It's usually when you go from zero to something is when the percentage of growth is drastic.
Right.
For a company that's been growing slowly every year, 20th year, and then you still do that, and then unusual to get it second year in a row, and unusual the third year in a row, and hopefully we'll be in the fourth year. Most of our growth has actually come from not constantly bringing in new clients, but really focusing and putting our energy in our existing clients so they grow and they need us more and they can afford us more. I in the 23 years actually, for my business law services, I've never really advertised. It's been my clients bringing in, on the average, each client brings me 2 to 3 new clients, refers, and it's me focusing on my existing clients rather than, a lot of firms and a lot of businesses in general, entrepreneurs, what they do is as soon as they have somebody as a client, they start taking them for granted. Oh, I have him. Let me focus on who else can I get? I don't think it's the right approach. It's you're constantly marketing to your existing clients. You're constantly selling it to, by providing value, by providing more value than you're charging them for. And so my basic formula is if I can give them more value than I take from them, they're not going to go away. They're going to keep coming back. They're going to stay. They're going to talk about me to their colleagues, and they're going to refer. And so that, and so by focusing on the firms and the clients we have, they experience growth, and as they experience growth, we do as well. And so, putting them first and putting their needs and their growth first before ours has become kind of that secret sauce. And yeah, I'm very grateful, and it's part of it also is it's interesting because I do some public speaking and stuff, and talk about personal growth as well. And as an entrepreneur, your mindset, your emotional intelligence, your belief system, everything, how you show up at work and how you manage stress and challenges, and that all affects your business. And so, and a lot of that is your personal growth. And so a lot of business schools, and I've gone to business school, and they teach you these are important as well, business plan and team building and branding and scaling and all that stuff. They don't really talk about the person who's actually making these decisions. There's a filter in you that all these decisions go through. And if you have fear of failure, you have certain things about, you have a issue with money or abundance, or we all have things, right? We all have certain limiting beliefs and negative thoughts running through our heads and stuff. unless you're aware of those and you know, make sure that they don't undermine your success, they will spill into your business. And part of my hyper growth in the last several years has been connected very much to me focusing on myself as well, where I, you know, relationship to myself changed, relationship to my business changed, relationship to my employees changed, relationship to my clients changed. And now I kind of bring that up with my clients as well and see how their businesses really get affected as well. I co-wrote a book with Shelley Lefko called Self-Made. That's going to be coming out end of this year or beginning of next year, hopefully. And it's bringing in personal growth, like, you know, your beliefs and your stories and entrepreneurship together. And so I think as an entrepreneur, you need to be also self-aware, your weaknesses, your strengths, and what you project. You know, CEO is chief emotional officer as much as chief executive officer. You know, how you show up in your business, how you show up in front, you know, with your employees, with your clients. And so again, a lot of this growth has been your team, my clients, and also kind of focusing on some of these other factors.
That is awesome. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you. I love that you provided not just the insight on the business and on the legal aspect, but also personal insight. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let us know. And if you find value from our program, please subscribe, share, and leave a review.
Please note that the discussions here are not intended to substitute for legal advice. Please seek the advice and help from a lawyer regarding any legal matters.